So this is going to be a fascinating episode because I talk a lot to leaders about diversity, but diversity of thought. So for one client over the last few weeks, I've had the privilege and the pleasure of working in Hong Kong, in New York, and in Zurich. And one of the beauties of that was the ability to start to work with diverse people across cultures, across demographics, across ethnicity. And it really kind of highlighted to me the benefits and the beauty really of having people who think very, very differently because of their backgrounds. And so I wanted to have a conversation with my guest this week about diversity and leadership, but also importantly, let's start to link that now to the future of diversity in technology, because we know, don't we, that generative AI is here to stay. It's a point in time. Everything may change. People are talking about existential threats. Well, is diversity in tech a threat, or it is an opportunity? And actually, when we think about it, we as human beings have got a lot of accountability to take on in relation to what we actually put into the machine in relation to what comes out the other side. This is going to be a fascinating episode. And come back to me and join me with Jason Nash just after this break. Hi, I'm Adam Pacifico, and welcome to the Leadership Enigma, a world-ranked, award-winning podcast that's insatiably curious as regards what leaders do, how they do it, and importantly, why. We'll delve into the human doing, but even deeper into the human being and the power of human-centered leadership to drive sustainable change. So whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, corporate executive, each week we speak to global experts, academics, rising stars, ambitious upstarts and disruptors, as together we will discover that success leaves clues. Jason, well, that was my attempt at a pretty good intro, I hope, about this fascinating subject, but welcome to the Leadership Enigma.
Thanks for having me. I'm enjoying it.
And we were just commenting, weren't we? I keep saying that. It's a great studio, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, very, very good. As long as it's making me look good, then I'm good.
It is making you look good, can I say? So thanks for taking the time to come in. This is always my favourite, to have the face-to-face conversation. And I'm really grateful to Mitchell Feldman, who put us in touch. And obviously Mitchell was X-Ray Glass, and he's already done an episode. And he's coming back into the studio, I think, in a couple of months. But Jason, tell us a little bit about your background and why we're talking today about diversity, leadership and technology.
Yeah, so I guess I have a pretty diverse background on multiple levels.
Yep.
I've worked in quite a number of industries. So I've worked, if I kind of work backwards in my career, been doing quite a bit of sort of independent consulting on the product management side and the AI side recently. But prior to that was at Travelport for 10 years, which is obviously a travel business. Where I had various roles in product management and also ran global marketing there for a while.
Yes.
Prior to that was at Microsoft for 5 years, where I was product manager for CRM. So again, very techy, software as a service, that kind of area. Prior to that was at Sony Business Europe for a while, working on ISO 9000 document management stuff.
Thank you for helping me on that.
And also some QS 9000 stuff in the automotive space when I was working prior to Sony at Poway, which was my 2 years living in Indianapolis.
Right.
An interesting location with a lot of great cultural aspects to it that gave me some really good insights in my life there. And prior to that, various smaller roles, having been at university in London at King's College doing a food biochemistry and management degree, which I walked away from and did absolutely nothing with.
I'm
like
always
many
fascinated that food biochemistry degree, and then you went into really, as you say, SaaS platforms.
Yeah, ultimately into sort of support desk initially, and then into product marketing, and then into pure product management.
Was this all by chance?
You know what? Headhunters have pulled me pretty much from one role to another. And actually, it's only been the last sort of probably 12 months in my career where I felt like I've been driving it myself more through actually some of my own choices.
Right, gotcha. And tell me a little bit about you and your background, because again, we're going to touch on the inclusivity piece. We're going to touch on neurodiversity, and I know that's close to our collective hearts on that front. And I'm really grateful for you as well, because we can't separate the human doing from the human being. So that's really the CV, but also it's who's Jason Nash.
Yeah. I like that human doing, human being. I think it's a really great analogy. I mean,
thank you.
In my own case, I'm dyslexic. And I'm proud dyslexic as well. I actually think it really gives me the ability to see the world in a slightly different light. I tend to be the person in the room that's thinking to me what is the obvious thing, and I'm not afraid to generally say that and to challenge the status quo. And I think in my career, what that's allowed me to do is look at traditional business models and see where the new opportunity is, either through partnering or through bringing the right sort of new thinking to that, to be able to say, okay, well, do we want another task list in our product? And if so, why are they going to use ours rather than somebody else's, right? So many products, we're seeing it now, it's becoming bloatware. This is going to become a bigger and bigger issue because with generative AI making code higher quality, faster delivery, we're going to see more and more features being added to products. And what that will do is you'll end up with bloatware, where products have got so many features in there.
It's impossible to know.
You don't know, why am I using this product rather than the other one?
Would be like this.
Yeah. And I think what this allows us to do, and what it means, is we have to be more disciplined with the product decisions and making very deliberate decisions about what we are going to add and what we're not going to add. And that really comes down to making sure you've got the right people in those roles. And so, my dyslexic brain has allowed me to do that. In my personal life,
I'm just going to ask one question there, because I take this in stages because my curious mind is working feverishly. You said you were very proud of your dyslexia and you were able to leverage it. But how old were you when you started to think that? Because I meet so many youngsters and teenagers who are worried, nervous, or even hide these diagnoses. So when did you in your life think, no, hang on, this is a real superpower?
So I'll give you a bit of background. So I was originally diagnosed in primary school.
Oh, early.
But for some reason, my notes got lost and I got re-diagnosed in my 4th year at secondary school.
Gotcha.
And at that point, it was almost too late to do anything about it. And I got a grant from the college, the council, and they gave me a grant for a computer, and I had a 386DX PC, if you remember that, Windows 3.1 and DOS 5.0 on it. And that was the device that really got me into computers in a really big way. I did have a Sinclair Spectrum as well and all of that stuff.
BBC Micro, the VIC-20.
We had access to that and a Sinclair, all the rest of it. But ultimately, that was what got me into computers. And that's really been my entire career. And I've seen technology as this massive enabler in my personal life that's allowed me to get over that, because I was the stupid kid at school, right? And I worked like wano to keep up. And luckily, I did science, and I found that I had a real skill for science, particularly 3D visualization of models. I was really good at organic chemistry.
But this was your dyslexia masking...
Yes.
What people thought you were capable of, right?
Completely. And what that meant is that even today I have a bit of a sort of high work ethic. I know I've got a work problem in that I find work to do even when I haven't got work to do, because
we'll go on to that.
When you were the stupid kid, you had to work extra hard to keep up.
But the thing is, you weren't the stupid kid.
No, but you get...
It's the perception and the label.
Exactly. And
which is so damaging.
It is. It really is. And that, I think that has meant that today, Elon Musk talks about his work ethic, and I'm not even going to propose I'm anywhere near as mental as he is, right? But I do have really ridiculous work ethic, and I put in really, really ridiculous hours sometimes because of that imposter.
Compensating?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I think, for a long time when you were told you were stupid, that gets ingrained in your head, and then you actually think to yourself, okay, I've got to overwork here to make sure that I'm achieving.
So that's interesting where the connection with computers and IT came in. But again, help me, at what age did you think, I'm not stupid, which clearly you're not, but actually, no, hang on, I can turn dyslexia into a superpower?
Yeah.
How old do you think you were where you started to really leverage and truly believe that?
So I think I really, really believed it at 2 points in my life. One, when I was finishing university.
Okay.
And, I got into King's College in London, which was a pretty prestigious university. And I was using my computer all of that time.
Right.
To word process, and I had the ability to be able to word process some of my things, and I was using WinWord 2.0 and some of this technology that at the time was groundbreaking. but that was what allowed me to kind of feel like I was overcoming it.
Right.
The other thing was that I always was quite a good verbal communicator, and I've had the good fortune in my career of, for instance, presenting on stage with Bill Gates to 500 members of the IOD.
Well, there you go. That's an interesting fact.
A long time ago.
Let's dig out that photo, James.
But you know what? That's the kind of thing I have. Great ability to tell good stories and communicate and think quickly on my feet. I also think that came down to playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, which I actually recommend for people that want to be able to think on their feet and be really creative. It is a great thing to get your kids to do.
I don't know whether our teenagers now won't even know what Dungeons and Dragons is if it's not.
Had a bit of a comeback
is it
in
a resurgence?
Recent years.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
There's also some interesting research that shows that leadership teams that actually are able to work better if they've actually role played in these kind of scenarios.
Maybe we'll have to bring Dungeons and Dragons to leadership development. so that's the neurodiversity piece as well.
Yes.
But you were also going to forgive me, I interrupted because I wanted to hear that. But also you're going to tell me some other details about you, who is Jason Nash.
Yeah. So I'm also a gay man. I've been very sort of out about myself, but I'm not somebody that kind of broadcasts it, but I think it's something to not hide in one's life. My partner is a very talented musician, and
what does he play?
He plays the piano.
Oh, okay.
Was at the Guildhall and did opera and piano.
Okay, this isn't just playing the piano, Jason, is it? This is a pretty good level of...
He's a very talented musician.
Right.
And so he does music lessons, but he also has Aspergers Syndrome.
Right.
So his ability to sit and play the same piece of music for 12 hours over and over again is probably related to some of that neurodiversity that he has. And we know that companies like Microsoft, my old employer, has actually, deliberately sought out those kind of people because they are the 10x developers in some cases that are truly the productivity enhancers in organizations because they have that focus that allows them to just keep going.
Okay. So there are many things here, and I want to break them down if I may, Jason, because I think then they lead neatly into the inclusivity and diversity in technology. So we're in some ways we're fusing this. So as you said, as a gay man, tell me a little bit about your feeling about the role of diverse leadership in any organization, not just in relation to one specific group, but that very broad church of diversity where in many ways the organization is proactively seeking out difference and diversity of thought. Just tell me a little about your experience as a senior leader in many businesses and what you see, what you feel.
Yes, so I think we all talk about diversity, right, as if it's this thing that we should want it.
It trips off the tongue, doesn't it?
Absolutely, but why do we want diversity, right?
That's a good question.
It's the outcome over the output idea, right?
Okay.
What is the outcome that we're looking for by having diverse thinking in an organization?
Yep.
And the outcome we're looking for is the checks and balances on the culture to make sure that we are forcing the organization to not be myopic. We want the business to actually be thinking about all the different opportunities. How do we make the products as broad and capable by actually bringing all of these ideas in? How do we challenge the status quo? How do we challenge the cultural biases to make sure that actually we are thinking about all of the different aspects that can make for a richer culture, richer product, richer working environment that actually means that we get the best out of everybody that's in that environment because we're not actually forcing it into this kind of constrained position where, we know that in this world there's a lot of black and white, right? And we're seeing...
What's easier for people to understand? Is either this or it's this?
Is it this or this? Exactly.
And it never is.
But actually the grey space, right, is where the best decisions... Compromise is at the heart of good politics. It's at the heart of actually good product design, in my opinion, as well. Constraints theory and making sure you understand that you have to do something within a budget. You have to do something within an envelope of development hours that you have.
Yes.
These are things that are really important to get our heads around. And I think in this new world of generative AI that we're heading into,
we're going to keep coming back to that, aren't we?
This is going to be an even more important thing.
Okay.
I recently read an article in the Wall Street Journal where certain CTOs are getting concerned about the fact that the code bases that they're managing are going to become a lot bigger. Because actually, generative AI can create lots of code at high quality, supporting the developers, which means, as I talked about this a little bit earlier, but this idea of feature creep, where products just become bigger and bigger and more bloated, is going to actually become a real significant issue. Just as like...
won't be able to understand them.
Well, it comes back down to really great user experience and customer experience in general. But it's the same thing with blog articles right now. If we want to do a blog article, we can go to ChatGPT. We can put in our preferred prompt to make sure we get the right prompt. We then put that prompt in to get the answer we want.
Yep.
And we get a pretty decent blog article.
I've tried it. It's quite amazing.
We can edit it down. But actually, what does this mean? We're going to have more and more output, more and more blog articles. Now, if the outcome is to get people to read that and to be enriched by that stuff, we need to be very careful, because we could all be busy fools on our hamster wheel running around creating more and more output, but that is not having the desired outcome that we really need to make happen in the organisation.
I like that, Jason, because it's the focus is on the user, the end customer, the consumer.
Yes.
Because you're right. I almost think about like walking through a supermarket, and if I've got 2 or 3 choices of a certain product, it's easy. If I've got 33 choices, it's almost... I have no idea, and I might end up walking away. It's too much. I've got no idea how to make a choice.
You make a really good point there, and I've talked about this, and it's one of the cognitive biases that we need to think about as product designers and leaders in general. And that is, we've all been into a foreign country, and you go to buy detergent, right? And suddenly all the brands are different, or toothpaste, right? The brands are all different, and you're cognitive overload. You are suddenly paralyzed by the fact that you do not know which of these numerous options. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I think that this is one of the things that Apple does so very well as a business, right? They distill the products down to the very root of what they are there to do, and they take away a lot of the clutter.
Yes.
And we know that that has served them very, very well. And I think that that discipline really comes down to really understanding, what business are you in, what's the job to be done,
yes.
And getting all of those things to be really clear makes a huge impact on the investment and value that businesses then deliver for their customers.
Jason, I've got to ask this question only because it was on my mind when I was over in Zurich, and that's the latest product from Apple. What do you think, timing-wise, price point-wise? Is this a real experiment for them that could go one of 2 ways?
I am an Apple fanboy.
I am too.
From the beginning. Like, I got the first iPhone. I bought it when I was in America. I was working at Microsoft at the time. It was politically incorrect. I used to take my telephone calls in the toilet occasionally because I didn't want to bring my iPhone out. So, and I had one of the grey MacBooks with the ball trackpad in it.
Right.
So I've been a true Apple fanboy for a while. I think it's a pretty remarkable product from what I can see.
Pricey.
It is pricey, but I think, let's be honest, we're all used to paying £1,500 for a smartphone if we buy that from Apple on a regular basis, right? So I think that they are masters at that end of the market. And I think we know as well that a lot of high net worth individuals tend to buy more Apple products.
Yeah.
So if anybody's going to afford that price point, it's going to be the Apple customer base.
Yeah. But it's more metaverse focused almost than generative AI, isn't it? So sometimes I wonder whether generative AI has pushed the metaverse into the shadows.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Apple keynote had very little. There were a few touches of generative AI that they talked about.
Yeah.
They talked about a couple of transformer models and things that they'd got into the new speech recognition. But I think, I think
time will tell.
I think it will tell.
I had to ask.
I'm pretty convinced that it will turn into a successful product line for them, but we'll see.
Okay. So in relation to your explanation of the role of inclusivity within leadership it's about challenging the status quo, not having the cookie cutter, avoiding the echo chamber, but being able to embrace that diversity of thought, because we're in a rapidly changing world, and what people want and need and consume is rapidly changing. So in many ways, is this about an organization being able to stay relevant?
Absolutely. It's that ability to be able to react rapidly to the changing environment that we all find ourselves in, right?
Gotcha.
So as a person that's managed product management teams, and I'll use this as an example, there are two schools of thought for product leaders. You get the people that are looking for product managers that come from the industry that the product that they're building sits in.
They've got that expertise.
Yeah, we want the experts, right?
Okay.
Or you get the people, which is more my mindset, which is actually, I don't want product experts that come from the industry.
Yep.
I want people that are actually going to spend 20% of their time talking to customers, and I want them to bring new industry ideas to actually enrich this product so that, if you've come from the medical environment, you only know the medical way of thinking.
Yes.
Which means you're constrained by all of the biases.
Even if you don't think you are.
The curse of knowledge that you cannot unlearn of what you know. And that means that when you come in, you're already constraining yourself by those ways of thinking. Whereas if you've come from a different industry, let's say you were in automotive and you went into medical, which some people might say, I never want a product person that came from automotive. But actually, they may have some supply chain management thinking about how the tier 1 to 4 automotive supply chain works, which could be applied into the medical space.
Which challenges the status quo.
Which allows for these new ideas. And that's where this disruptive innovation that so many businesses would like to apply come from. It's through this diverse set of thinking where all these new ideas come together, which challenge the conventions.
So, Jason, in your career, I wonder, have you ever heard the phrase, listen, Jason, we've always done it like this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We've always done it this way.
Yes. And that for me is like the red...
is that the death knell?
Well, no, that's the red flag to the bull for me, because that's then the opportunity to really challenge people's thinking and say, well, just because we've always done it that way, that's surely the reason why we need to think about this in a different way. I mean, if there's one thing that is happening faster and faster in business, and ChatGPT was the classic, I may have got those letters the wrong way around with my dyslexia. If I have, I apologize. That's the classic thing, right? That product went from nothing to 100 million users in less time than any other product in history. We're only seeing these curves get faster and faster.
Right.
And so, businesses can't hang around on this stuff. They've got to have...
Time stands still for no one.
They've got to get their acts together. And, it's funny, I've been around for a couple of these transformations. I was at the beginning when the internet was first coming out and email servers were about, right?
A lot has changed in our lifetime, right?
In those times, right? I was here for mobile. I was here for cloud. All of those were big. They were just small in comparison to what the AI revolution that we're about to go through is going to be. And I'm super excited to be, at this point where we're going to see it really have impact. And for people with dyslexia, this is such an enabling technology.
Oh, that's interesting.
It really, I've been engaging with it a lot. I've been doing some prompt engineering, and I've had some time between contracts where I've been actually using various tools like Langchang and Pinecone, which is a vector database. And I'm not a developer.
I'm going to nod at you knowingly now, Jason.
I'm not a developer, but I can play around with code and stuff. And I've been building some interesting tools with it. It's very, very powerful.
Okay. Let me ask you this. As a member of the LGBTQ community, are organizations doing enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is... Tim Cook is obviously the figurehead person out there that we know. I think it's still fairly uncommon to be aware of who in our Fortune, 5,000 companies, FTSE 250, whatever, who are openly gay. I don't feel that people should be forced to actually disclose it, because what they get up to in their own lives is their own business.
So that's a personal choice, isn't it? And it's different, isn't it, from whether, from an ethnicity perspective, it's something that you choose to reveal
exactly.
or not.
You can either choose or not choose to do that, right? There's some things you can't hide.
Correct.
But I think that there's still a certain amount of stigma around that. And people will only overcome the stigma if people are open and transparent about those things, and use it as a benefit. I genuinely believe that my dyslexic gay mind allows me to see the world in a way that other people would not see.
I love the way you describe it in that way, because as you say, it's and I hope there are youngsters listening to this, young leaders and who want to go on and will do great things, that they start to understand that if they are different, that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And actually embrace that.
Well, it's a super. You use the term superpower. I met my old boss from Microsoft a couple of weeks back.
Yep.
I can't remember his second name, Gary, but he went on to be the CEO for Xero.
Right.
In the UK. And
we'll get him on as a guest.
Yeah, he's a really great guy. You'd enjoy him. And we were just chatting, and he said, Jason, your superpower has always been the ability to tell a good story, to get people excited and enthusiastic about, the transformation that you're trying to take people on.
Yes.
And I believe that, we've all got that secret thing that we're really good at, and it's about making sure you're in an environment and with the right team where those things are going to be able to be leveraged rather than suppressed at the end of the day. And people should always make sure they're in an environment where they feel they're doing their best work.
And that's why I was really keen for us to have this conversation, because you were very keen to talk about who you are, the human being, how that's led into the human doing. But now let's join, I think, this conversation with a conversation that is happening everywhere, and that is tech. Look, tech is not new. In fact, AI is decades old. We've been using AI in some way, shape or form for a long time, even without realizing it. But now, as soon as ChatGPT put this out into the open market, which perhaps was a risk or a gamble to unleash the beast in the world, I don't know. But let's have a talk about what should leaders be mindful of now in relation to inclusivity and diversity in technology. Because let's be honest, it's the humans who are starting this, and then it might be AI that takes it forward. I don't know where this goes. But tell us about some of the things that you're seeing and some of the lessons that you would love to share with organizations about inclusivity and diversity in technology, to make sure it's not bias in, bias out.
Yeah, so I mean,
and not through mischief either. I don't mean that. We all carry biases, and that's who we are.
Yeah, and we're all biased to some degree, and we all have to, I think, be challenged on not being in an echo chamber that just reinforces our own neuroses and our own biases, right? I mean,
we recruit in our own image.
Yes, exactly. And I think that these new large language models are being trained on huge amounts of data.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we need to make sure that data is sufficiently diverse that allows for different viewpoints to be built into the models, so that we're not forcing sort of a straight, white, heterosexual male bias into the entire view.
A cookie-cutter view.
Yeah, exactly. It's back to the reasons why diversity is important. It's important that the data set that we train on is therefore important as well. And I think the recent Google announcements where, some of their models were able to use languages that they hadn't trained the model on very much, because some of the new, what's the term I'm looking for?
And this is where I can't help you, Jason.
So there are these new behaviors that some of the models have sort of spontaneously been able to work on.
This is the generative part, right?
The generative part, yeah, but there's a specific word that they've been using for these new capabilities that the models are capable of. And it appears that the more data that they're trained on, the more of these certain word capabilities are suddenly being discovered.
Right.
And so I think that, again, the more diverse the content, we're going to see more of this capability, which will make these models even brighter. I mean, I look at this a little bit like, if you look back in history at Renaissance period, some of the greatest discoveries were made when we brought science and art. You look at Leonardo da Vinci, for example. He brought together all of these great ideas, and Renaissance man/person in today's world was this sort of melting pot of new ideas. I genuinely believe that these large language models are going to generate a new renaissance by having all of this information fused within them. And it comes down to us as leaders to find how we're going to apply this technology, but also using the right prompts to uncover these nuggets that are probably already lying in these models. But it's about asking the right questions. You know, I see a lot of people using the models for what feels like very sort of trivial types of questions.
I think people are learning themselves how to get the best out of
I think that's fair.
The technology. Listen, I've seen some episodes on other podcasts and read Armageddon-like interviews in relation to existential threat, and I'm not suggesting that isn't something that one has to be wary of, and we no doubt, don't we, that the government here is looking at trying to put some regulation in, although how regulation keeps up with the development of technology is nigh on impossible. What is your feeling with this? We're at a point in time, but a point of great opportunity, a point of great threat, or a little bit of both?
I mean, I think, as in all things in life, it's going to be a little bit of both. But I think let's not forget that it's the human being that is going to use these things for wrong, if indeed
to create human doing or AI doing capabilities.
Exactly. If we want to ask, how to create a weapon for, bio destruction, and it's going to give us the answers for that thing, well, we ask the question, right? So it really comes down to, I think, us as human beings rising to the challenge and making sure that we're using these tools in a positive light, and the right safeguards are put in place to try and make sure that we are avoiding the misuse of them. But let's not forget, you can go and buy a CRISP machine for doing genetic programming of things pretty easily today. These devices were hundreds of thousands of pounds, and as now you can pick them up for a few thousand. The ability for people to be empowered to do all sorts of things. I mean, take this, for example, right? We're in a studio here communicating with as many people want to hear this podcast. As individuals, we have the power that we never had 10 years ago because you would have needed to be the BBC or whatever, right? Yeah. So this sort of constant improvement of technology is allowing more and more people to have access to do more and more in their lives.
Now, I was working with Jonathan Reichenthal, who's been a guest on the show. I said to you, he's a great educator and keynote former chief information officer for the city of Palo Alto. So hello to Jonathan. I spoke to him only yesterday. But he said something that was fascinating to me and obvious. But he said, actually, for many decades ago, we were consumers because you needed the press or the BBC in order to provide us with sometimes just a one-dimensional outlook. But now we're all content creators.
Completely.
And we are creating content, you and I, now. But, I mean, that's an enormous amount of content being generated by billions of people that is potentially the future platform of AI. How on earth do you think about diversity and inclusivity when so much content is being created?
Well, again, I think this comes back to output over outcome as well, right?
Like this,
it's quality of the content that's going into these models.
Yep.
And the tuning of the models will be absolutely critical as well. We want to make sure that we've got, if we've got books going into the authors, we want to make sure that we've got gay authors in there as well as non-gay authors, right? We want to make sure that the core content is truly diverse. Okay. I think what's interesting, and you make a great point, is that with the new models, right now they've been training primarily on text-based things, but they will be training more on podcasts and video and audio.
We could end up as part and parcel.
Who knows? Yeah, we might be included in some training model
That'd
data.
Be nice, right?
Indeed.
Okay. What is some of your key lessons or reminders then to leaders of any size business about trying to get this right? And I appreciate everyone is feeling their way through this, but if a leader is thinking we are in a period of transformational change, we're in a period of embracing digital technology, and everyone must, data is really the new liquid gold.
Yeah.
How does he or she, or what do they have in the back of their mind about getting it right from it being the right diversity and inclusivity machine?
So there is a book called Competing in the Age of AI.
Right.
It has a green and black cover. I can't remember the authors. But it is a really phenomenal book. And there's I think chapter 4, they have an email from Benioff when he, early in Amazon's history, said that from this point forwards, all data and interfaces must be serialized in this way to make them transformable and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And effectively, this book talks about how organizations need to structure their data to enable them to be able to compete in the age of AI. And but what it does is it has a lot of really great insights and thoughts about how you need to think about structuring your data, normalizing your data, having, we've all been in businesses, right, where the accounts department think it's the accounting system that's the master, and the CRM system and marketing think, and everybody's kind of fighting over who owns the data in the organization.
Yeah.
But actually, those businesses that get this right and structure the data in a very holistic way have got their data already set up to be able to start thinking about creating their own generative models, right? We've seen that NVIDIA have got their AI labs now where you can start thinking about training your own models for your own company based on your own data. Microsoft announced something similar at their Build event recently. So I think that as leaders, we first and foremost need to understand more about where our data is and be less territorial about the ownership of it.
Right.
We need to encourage our people to be exploring the use of these tools. Now, I know that goes counter to some CEOs and some businesses have said you will not use these tools. Data is going outside the organization. I think that's naive. And the reason I think it's naive is those businesses that get this working well, the cost advantage to them of outsourcing some of their work to a model that's working 24/7.
Yeah.
How do you compete with that if you've got a person doing that 100% on the other side? So you've got to blend this. And I think for quite a few years now, I did a course, an 8-week online course with MIT, which was about AI and strategic application in organizations. And what the takeaway for me from that course primarily was about was that the future is in using people and AI to do the best of both worlds, right?
Yeah.
And we should be great at engaging as human beings and being emotionally and empathetically intelligent. And we should use the AI models to help us do smarter things more quickly and take away some of the drudge work that slows us down.
What I'm hearing from you and other specialists in the area, this is actually a non-negotiable. And I think one of the challenges is still checking provenance, because there's so much misinformation out there that how do you ensure that you're not putting misinformation into a system to get misinformation out?
So that is one of the best things I learned at university was the scientific method, right? And every person in the world should be skeptical about where the data comes from and how they're going to prove that is a fact, whether it's right or wrong. And I think that the scientific method is the one brilliant takeaway that allows everybody, and businesses have applied it as well. If you look at the lean startup movement and you look at building a business hypothesis, testing that hypothesis, you don't have to build a product to validate your assumptions on that side. But I think the scientific method is something that we all, whether we call it that or not, but we all need to be very aware and use that in our day-to-day work.
Are there multiple methods that people can?
I mean, the primary scientific method is about having a hypothesis and then testing it. And either, as far as science is concerned, if you cannot disprove it, then it, over a long period of time, it might be considered a law. And at those points, we don't generally throw everything away. But I know looking at some stuff that the James Webb Telescope's been churning out over the last few months, there's a few physicists scratching their heads trying to figure out how some of their laws have been thrown into disarray as well.
Wow. I mean, there's a bit of a yin and a yang here, isn't there, because of the obvious benefits and insight that one might get from AI, but also, I think we're being told that we're 5 minutes away from us not being able to believe anything we read, anything we see, and anything we hear, because it's been generated by AI and there's no way of actually really knowing. Mm-hmm. So again,
the deep fakes.
I mean, the deep fakes, I'm already started seeing them are astonishing. And we're already hearing from the law enforcement arena how there are some nefarious practices already cropping up.
I trained a model with my own voice a few weeks back when I was just tinkering.
Yep.
And I gave it literally about 30 seconds of my voice.
Yes.
And it can reproduce my voice in a way that I found quite uncannily.
That's kind of scary, because then we get into the realms of people getting calls from you that aren't you.
Absolutely.
And wow. Listen, this is fascinating in relation to, as I say, these are important topics: diversity, inclusivity, and the future of technology in making sure that it still has inclusivity and diversity. And there's just so much to think about, Jason. But as you say, no leader, I think, has all the answers, but also no leader can start to push this to one side because it's just too important. How can people get in contact with you, Jason?
People can reach me at jason.nash@curiouscognition.com.
jason.nash@curiouscognition.com. I'll put this in the show notes.
Great, thanks. It's been really interesting to chat with you. I think, this is a really important topic. And I think the generative AI thing for businesses, if they have product roadmaps today and they're not thinking about how this plays a part, they definitely should be, because I think it's going to be the real game changer for many businesses. And just on that one point, traditionally we used APIs to communicate between software. But what you're seeing in these new models is natural language is becoming that new connecting glue, right? Because a natural language model could talk to another language model. Put my teeth
There's an irony there, right?
Exactly, yeah, there is. And suddenly we're talking in human language, not in APIs and technology. And I think we'll actually see more of this. We'll see, because natural language has actually become the thing that we've communicated in for so long, we're going to see that starting to happen in more and more technology.
Maybe that's why people feel there is an existential threat, because now you've got machine teaching machine, and more powerful and more knowledgeable than any human on the planet, and being able to download or draw down from the world's library,
Well, the discrete models are arguably better at us in various things. As you link more of these models together, then they become even better than us, right?
Well, let's you and I keep an eye on this, and maybe we'll have to come back into the studio and talk about the next chapter in this journey. Jason, thanks for being a superstar and coming into the Leadership Enigma. I hope it's been fun for you.
Indeed. Thanks so much. Great to
take great care.
Time. Bye-bye.
Join us again next week for more curiosity and insight with the Leadership Enigma. We'd love to hear your comments on today's show, as well as suggestions for future topics and guests. Get in touch with me on LinkedIn or visit us at www.leadersenigma.com. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe on all your major podcast platforms and on our dedicated YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining the community.